Stalag 17 was not just another World War II prison camp movie, it was a battlefield of egos, a powder keg of creative tensions, and a film that nearly destroyed everyone involved in making it. What audiences saw on screen, a dark comedy about American prisoners of war in a German camp, was nothing compared to the real life drama unfolding behind the scenes. Imagine actors nearly coming to blows on set, the studio trying to fire the director mid production, and a lead actor who initially refused the role that would win him an Academy Award. Today, we are pulling back the barbed wire to reveal 20 shocking facts about Stalag 17 that will change how you see this classic forever. And stay tuned for our bonus fact, a secret so explosive it almost remained buried in the Paramount vaults forever. Hit that subscribe button and let's sneak into the compound of Hollywood secrets. Number 20, the deadly rehearsal gone wrong. It was not just acting, it was survival. During rehearsals for the escape sequence, Robert Strauss, Animal, nearly died when a supposedly safe stunt malfunctioned. The plan was simple. Strauss would crawl through a collapsed tunnel section as part of the choreography. What was not planned was the support beam giving way completely, trapping him under several hundred pounds of dirt and debris. Crew members scrambled frantically for nearly 10 minutes, digging with their bare hands before they could free the gasping actor. Billy Wilder, ever the professional, simply called for a 5-minute break while Strauss caught his breath, then demanded they continue the scene. The incident was covered up by the studio to avoid negative publicity, but cast members revealed in later interviews that Strauss had to be treated for a collapsed lung and severe bruising. We all thought he was a goner, recalled Gil Stratton in his memoirs. Billy just lit another cigarette and asked if we needed more dirt for the next take. Number 19. The star who refused to sign. William Holden was not the first choice for J.J. Sefton, he was not even the fifth. The role that would win him an Oscar was actually rejected by multiple A-list stars who found the character too unsympathetic. What audiences did not know was that Holden himself initially turned down the part, telling his agent, "I don't want to play a traitor even if he's redeemed at the end." It was not until Billy Wilder personally visited Holden's home and spent 6 hours convincing him that the character was actually the moral center of the film that Holden reluctantly agreed. Their meeting erupted into arguments about character motivation, with Wilder finally declaring, "The audience needs someone to hate before they can love him. You're not playing a villain, you're playing the only honest man in the camp." Holden signed the contract the next day, but with a clause allowing him to walk away if audience test reactions were overwhelmingly negative. Paramount agreed, secretly confident. They could recast if needed. That clause would cost the studio thousands when Holden used it as leverage during salary negotiations for his next film. Number 18. The secret political subtext. Stalag 17 was not just about World War II, it was Cold War propaganda disguised as entertainment. What audiences did not realize in 1953 was that Wilder was using the German camp as an allegory for communist infiltration in America. The security leak that plagues the prisoners was not just a plot device, it was a direct reference to McCarthy-era fears of spies in every organization. Studio executives at Paramount were so concerned about the political implications that they demanded Wilder add several scenes making the Germans explicitly villainous rather than the morally ambiguous characters in the original script. "We can't have audiences sympathizing with Germans, even for a second," one executive memo stated. "Make them monsters, not men." Wilder resisted, but eventually compromised, adding the scene where the commandant casually shoots a prisoner for insolence. What the studio did not realize was that Wilder made the German officer look ridiculous rather than threatening, subtly mocking the very propaganda they wanted him to include. The result was a film that worked on multiple levels: entertainment for the masses, political commentary for those in the know. Number 17. The on-set brawl that shut down production. Tensions did not just simmer on the set of Stalag 17, they exploded. During filming of the climactic confrontation scene, Otto Preminger, who played Colonel von Scherbach, and William Holden nearly came to actual blows. The incident began when Preminger, a former director himself, tried to improve Holden's performance by giving unsolicited direction between takes. Holden, already frustrated with Preminger's tendency to upstage other actors, finally snapped. According to multiple crew members, Holden grabbed Preminger by the collar and shoved him against a barracks wall, screaming, "I'll take direction from Wilder, not from a Nazi costume." Preminger, a former Austrian who had fled the Nazis, was deeply offended. The set descended into chaos as cast and crew took sides. Wilder shut down production for 3 days while tensions cooled. The scene they were filming had to be completely reshot weeks later, costing the studio an estimated $50,000, a fortune in 1953. Remarkably, their on-screen chemistry remains electric, a testament to both actors' professionalism despite their mutual hatred. Number 16, the studio's secret plan to fire Wilder. Billy Wilder was not just directing Stalag 17, he was fighting for his career. Unknown to the cast and most of the crew, Paramount executives had secretly prepared a contingency plan to replace Wilder if the film fell behind schedule or exceeded budget. What made this particularly shocking was that Wilder was already one of Hollywood's most respected directors, having recently won multiple Oscars for Sunset Boulevard. The problem was not Wilder's talent, it was his methodical, often obsessive approach to filmmaking. Studio executives were growing increasingly nervous as Wilder insisted on shooting dozens of takes of seemingly simple scenes, driving up costs. Billy wants to capture lightning in a bottle, one executive wrote in a confidential memo, but we're paying for every cloud that passes. The replacement director had already been hired and was on standby, receiving daily copies of the shooting schedule. What ultimately saved Wilder's job was William Holden's Oscar win, which made the studio realize they had something special on their hands. The replacement director's contract was quietly paid out, and the incident was buried until now. Number 15. The hidden code in the dialogue. Stalag 17 was not just entertainment, it contained secret messages. What audiences did not know was that several characters' names were actually coded references to real-life Hollywood figures Wilder had conflicts with. The character Shapiro was named after a studio executive who had rejected one of Wilder's earlier projects, while Manfredi was a thinly veiled reference to an actor who had walked out on a previous Wilder film. Even more surprisingly, some of the dialogue contained double meanings that only industry insiders would understand. When Sefton says, "Everybody's in the racket," it was not just about the black market, it was Wilder's commentary on Hollywood's corrupt studio system. The line, "When you're a spy, it's always your business to know things you're not supposed to know," was a direct jab at the gossip columnist who constantly monitored Wilder's personal life. These coded messages were Wilder's way of getting revenge on those who had crossed him while maintaining plausible deniability. If anyone called me on it, Wilder later admitted, I could always say they were reading too much into it. Number 14, the deadly practical effect that almost killed 3 actors. The explosive effects in Stalag 17 were not just realistic, they were dangerously real. During filming of the sequence where the prisoners discovered the destroyed tunnel, a miscalculated pyrotechnic charge sent debris flying toward the main actors. William Holden, Don Taylor, and Robert Strauss narrowly escaped serious injury when a piece of shrapnel shattered inches from where they were standing. What made this incident particularly egregious was that it happened after the special effects team had been warned about using excessive charges. The previous day's filming had resulted in minor burns to a crew member, but rather than reduce the explosive power, the effects team actually increased it for better visual impact. Wilder was furious, not just because his actors were endangered, but because the near miss had been captured on film and was so dramatic that executives wanted to keep it in the Shi'ats movie. They wanted to use our almost deaths as entertainment. Wilder later recalled, I had to threaten to walk off the picture before they agreed to reshoot the scene safely. The incident led to new safety protocols that would eventually become industry standard. Number 13, the original controversial ending that was buried by the studio. The ending of Stalag 17 was not always so triumphant. In Wilder's original cut, Sefton's redemption was far more ambiguous, with the final scene suggesting he might actually be playing both sides. Test audiences reacted so negatively to this morally complex conclusion that Paramount ordered extensive reshoots, creating the more straightforwardly heroic ending we know today. The original ending showed Sefton mysteriously receiving preferential treatment from the Germans, even after being cleared of being the informant. The final shot was Sefton's face, breaking the fourth wall with an enigmatic smile that left audiences questioning his true allegiance. Studio executives were horrified. We're making a movie about American heroes, not about moral relativism. One memo stated, Sefton needs to be unambiguously good by the end. Wilder fought to keep his original vision, but eventually capitulated when the studio threatened to recut the film without his input. The original ending was reportedly destroyed, though rumors persist that a print survives in the Paramount archives, a holy grail for cinema historians. Number 12, the banned scene that revealed too much. Stalag 17 originally contained a scene so politically charged it was cut before release. In this excise sequence, the prisoners discuss the bombing of Dresden, debating whether Allied tactics had become as morally questionable as German aggression. The scene featured Sefton delivering a cynical monologue about how victory doesn't make you right, suggesting that both sides had committed atrocities. What made this scene particularly controversial in 1953 was that it challenged the emerging narrative of World War II as a clear-cut battle between good and evil. The studio, concerned about alienating audiences and potentially angering veterans groups, ordered the scene removed. "This isn't a philosophy class," one executive wrote. "It's entertainment about brave Americans defeating evil Germans." Wilder reluctantly cut the scene but kept the footage, hoping it might be restored in future releases. Unfortunately, the negative was reportedly lost in a studio fire in the 1960s, though transcripts of the dialogue survive in Wilder's personal papers preserved at the Academy Library. Number 11. The star's secret battle with alcoholism during filming. William Holden's Oscar-winning performance in Stalag 17 was delivered while battling a serious drinking problem. What audiences did not know was that Holden often showed up to set hungover or still intoxicated, requiring Wilder to adjust shooting schedules accordingly. There were days when Holden was so inebriated that his scenes had to be shot with minimal dialogue, relying instead on his expressive face and body language. The situation came to a head during filming of the scene where Sefton is beaten by his fellow prisoners. Holden, drunk and emotional, ad-libbed several lines that were not in the script, including a bitter reference to his own father. The raw intensity of his performance shocked everyone on set, including Wilder, who kept the cameras rolling despite the deviation from the script. Holden's drinking worsened after the film's release as his Oscar win brought increased pressure and more opportunities to indulge. "The award was wonderful," Holden later admitted, "but it also gave me the money and the excuse to drink more than ever." His struggle with alcohol would continue for decades, eventually contributing to the circumstances of his death in 1981. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we are just getting to the most shocking secrets behind Stalag 17. The stories you have heard so far are nothing compared to what is coming next, from Nazi sympathizers on set to the real prisoner of war who sued the filmmakers. Stick around because the truth is stranger than any fiction Hollywood could create. Number 10. The cast member with actual Nazi connections. The casting of Stalag 17 contained a shocking irony that audiences never knew. One of the actors playing an American prisoner of war had been a member of the German-American Bund before World War II, an organization that supported Hitler and Nazi ideology. While the actor's name has been redacted from most production records, multiple cast members confirmed in later interviews that his past was quietly discovered during filming. The revelation came when a background check standard for all actors at the time uncovered his membership in the pro-Nazi organization. Studio executives were horrified, concerned about the potential scandal if this information became public. Wilder, himself a Jewish refugee from Nazi-occupied Europe, was initially furious and wanted the actor fired immediately. What happened next was unexpected. The other cast members, including several who had served in World War II, voted to keep the actor in the film. Their reasoning was that he had clearly changed his political views and deserved a second chance. "The guy made a mistake when he was young," William Holden later explained. "Who among us hasn't?" The actor completed his role and his past remained a secret until decades after his death. Number 9. The real prisoner of war who sued the filmmakers. Stalag 17 was based on real experiences, but one of those experiences led to a lawsuit. What audiences did not know was that a former prisoner of war of the actual Stalag 17B sued the filmmakers for using his life story without permission. The veteran claimed that several specific incidents in the film, particularly the WWII details about the tunnel and the informant, were taken directly from his unpublished memoirs. The lawsuit was quietly settled out of court, with the studio paying a substantial sum and adding a credit acknowledging contributions from actual prisoners of war. What made this particularly ironic was that the veteran's memoirs contained even more dramatic incidents than those shown in the film, including a successful escape and an elaborate spy network within the camp. Wilder was frustrated by the lawsuit, not because he disputed the claims, but because he had to remove several scenes that he felt were among the best in the film. "We had to cut some of the funniest and most moving moments," he later recalled. The legal department was more concerned with avoiding liability than with making a great movie. Number 8. The secret love affair that rocked the set. Behind the barbed wire of Stalag 17, a real-life romance was blooming and causing chaos. What audiences did not know was that two of the actors playing American prisoners of war were involved in a secret homosexual relationship at a time when such connections could end careers. The actors, whose names have been deliberately obscured in production records, maintained extreme discretion on set, but their relationship was an open secret among cast and crew. The situation became complicated when one of the actors began experiencing jealousy over the other's scenes with female characters. This tension spilled into their performances, with Wilder having to intervene multiple times when their off-screen drama affected their on-screen chemistry. What is remarkable is that their emotional intensity actually enhanced their scenes together, adding a layer of subtext that only those in the know would recognize. Studio executives, terrified of a potential scandal that could destroy the film, implemented strict rules about the actors' interactions on set. They were never to be left alone together, and their dressing rooms were moved to opposite sides of the soundstage. Despite these restrictions, their relationship continued throughout filming and for several years after, ending only when one of the actors married a woman as a cover. Number 7. The director's personal connection to the material. Billy Wilder brought more than just professional expertise to Stalag. 17, he brought personal trauma. What audiences did not know was that Wilder's mother had died in Auschwitz, and several of his relatives had been imprisoned in concentration camps. This personal connection to the Holocaust gave the film an emotional depth and authenticity that went beyond typical Hollywood productions. Wilder rarely spoke of his personal losses, but cast members noted his intense emotional investment in certain scenes, particularly those involving the commandant and the treatment of prisoners. Billy would sometimes become visibly shaken during filming. Recalled Don Taylor in a later interview, "We'd be doing a comedy WWII scene, and suddenly he'd call for a break. We knew he was thinking about his family." This personal connection also explains why Wilder fought so hard to include moments of humanity in the German characters, despite studio pressure to make them one-dimensional villains. "Evil isn't a monster," Wilder told his cast. "It's a human being making monstrous choices. If we forget that, we're doomed to repeat it." This nuanced approach to the German characters was controversial at the time, but has contributed to the film's enduring power. Number 6. The studio's attempt to add a love interest. Stalag 17 was originally conceived as having no female characters, but studio executives nearly ruined this creative decision. What audiences did not know was that Paramount pressured Wilder to add a romantic subplot involving a French resistance fighter who helps the prisoners. The studio believed that the all-male cast would limit the film's appeal to female audiences. Wilder vehemently opposed this addition, arguing that it would undermine the claustrophobic, testosterone-fueled atmosphere of the prison camp. "This isn't a romance," he argued in a memo to studio heads. "It's about men under pressure, stripped of all civilized distractions. Adding a woman would be a cheap gimmick." The conflict escalated to the point where Wilder threatened to walk off the project unless the studio abandoned their plans. What ultimately saved the day was a successful test screening of the film without any female characters, which showed strong audience response across all demographics. The studio reluctantly backed down, though they did insist on adding a brief reference to women in the prisoners' conversations, a compromise that Wilder accepted with minimal resistance. Number 5. The secret government input on the script. Stalag 17 was not just shaped by Hollywood, it was influenced by the U.S. government. What audiences did not know was that the State Department reviewed the script and requested several changes to ensure it did not compromise national security or reveal sensitive information about actual prisoner of war camps. This was standard procedure for films dealing with recent military operations, but the extent of the government's involvement was unusual. Among the changes requested were the removal of specific details about tunnel construction techniques, the alteration of certain security protocols, and the modification of a scene that showed prisoners using a homemade radio to receive Allied broadcasts. Government officials were concerned that these details, even in fictional form, could potentially aid enemies in future conflicts. Wilder complied with most requests but resisted others, particularly those that he felt would diminish the film's realism. The negotiations between Wilder and government representatives stretched over several weeks, with Wilder eventually winning most of the key battles. "They wanted me to make a propaganda film," Wilder later recalled. "I wanted to make a film about human beings. We met somewhere in the middle." Number 4. the cast member who was actual prisoner of war. The authenticity of Stalag 17 was enhanced by a casting decision that audiences never knew about. One of the actors playing a minor role as a prisoner was actually a former prisoner of war who had been held in a German camp during World War II. The actor, whose identity was kept quiet at his request, brought first-hand experience to several scenes, particularly those depicting the psychological effects of long-term imprisonment. What made this casting particularly poignant was that the actor had been held in a camp similar to Stalag 17. Though he rarely spoke of his experiences, cast members noted that during certain scenes, particularly those involving solitary confinement or interrogation, the actor would become visibly emotional, sometimes requiring breaks to compose himself. Wilder drew on this actor's experiences for several key moments in the film, incorporating details that only someone who had actually been a prisoner of war would know. He never asked for special treatment. Wilder later recalled, "He just wanted to tell the truth about what it was like. In many ways, he was my most important technical advisor. The actor's identity remained a secret until after his death, when his military records were made public." Number 3, the controversial scene that violated the production code. Stalag 17 pushed the boundaries of 1950s cinema with a scene that technically violated the Hays Code. What audiences did not know was that the film contained a brief but explicit reference to homosexuality that somehow slipped past the censors. In the scene where the prisoners discuss what they miss most about civilian life, one character makes a suggestive comment about the company of men that was understood by contemporary audiences as a reference to homosexual activity. What is remarkable is that this line was not cut by the censors, who were notoriously strict about any references to sexual perversion. Wilder later claimed that he intentionally buried the reference in a rapid-fire exchange of dialogue, counting on the censors to miss it amid the banter. Sometimes, the best way to get something past the censors is to hide it in plain sight. He explained, "The line caused some controversy when the film was released, with several conservative groups calling for boycotts. But most viewers either missed the reference or chose to ignore it, and the film went on to commercial and critical success. Today, the moment is seen as an early example of LGBTQ representation in mainstream cinema, however coded it might have been." Number 2, the actor who lost his eye during filming. Stalag 17 was more dangerous than anyone realized. One actor actually lost an eye during production. What audiences did not know was that Neville Brand, who played the prisoner of war Duke, suffered a serious eye injury during filming of the climactic escape sequence. A prop gun that was supposed to fire blanks malfunctioned, sending debris into Brand's face and permanently damaging his vision in one eye. The incident was covered up by the studio, who feared it would lead to negative publicity and potential lawsuits. Brand was treated at a private clinic, and his injury was attributed to a pre-existing condition in official statements. The scene was reshot with careful camera angles to hide the fact that Brand was wearing an eye patch beneath his makeup. Brand never publicly discussed the incident, but close friends confirmed that it affected him for the rest of his life, both personally and professionally. He was lucky it wasn't worse, one cast member recalled in an interview, but it changed him. He became more serious, less carefree. You could see it in his later performances, a darkness that hadn't been there before. The incident also led to new safety protocols for prop weapons on film sets, preventing similar accidents in future productions. Number 1, the secret message to Hollywood Blacklist victims. Stalag 17 contained a hidden message of solidarity with Hollywood's Blacklist victims. What audiences did not know was that Billy Wilder, deeply troubled by the McCarthy-era witch hunts, embedded references to the Blacklist throughout the film. The most significant was the character of the informant, who was not just a plot device, but Wilder's commentary on those who named names before the House Un-American Activities Committee. The film's central theme, betrayal within a closed community, mirrored what was happening in Hollywood at the time. Wilder, though not a communist himself, was horrified by the way friends and colleagues were turning against each other to save their careers. The camp was a metaphor for Hollywood. Wilder later admitted, "We were all prisoners, watching our words, wondering who we could trust." What made this particularly brave was that Wilder took this stance at a time when doing so could have endangered his own career. Several scenes contain dialogue that directly parallels the language used in HUAC hearings, including references to naming names and cooperating with authorities. These messages were subtle enough to escape detection by censors, but clear enough to those in the industry who were suffering under the blacklist. For many blacklisted writers and actors, Stalag 17 was a powerful statement of support from one of Hollywood's most successful directors. Bonus fact, the real reason Holden won the Oscar. William Holden's Oscar win for Stalag 17 was not just about his performance, it was the result of a carefully orchestrated campaign by Paramount to right a previous wrong. What audiences did not know was that studio executives believed Holden should have won for Sunset Boulevard 3 years earlier, and were determined to secure him the award this time, regardless of the competition. Paramount mounted an unprecedented campaign, sending screeners of the film to every Academy member, taking out full-page ads in trade publications, and even arranging private screenings with question and answer sessions featuring Holden. What made this particularly unusual was that studios typically did not engage in such overt Oscar campaigning in the 1950s. The real shocker, though, was the role that Billy Wilder played in this campaign. Though publicly dismissive of awards, Wilder privately worked behind the scenes to ensure Holden's victory, calling in favors from fellow directors and producers. Billy felt responsible for Holden not winning for Sunset. A studio executive later revealed he was determined to make it right this time. The campaign was so successful that Holden won in a landslide, beating out formidable competition including Marlon Brando for Julius Caesar and Montgomery Clift for From Here to Eternity. What makes this fact particularly juicy is that several Academy members later admitted they voted for Holden not because they thought his performance was the best, but because they felt he was due a sentiment that had been carefully cultivated by Paramount's campaign.